I'm called to my word processor on my smart device, and I'll see what ideas might be present. This day has been somewhat tedious for myself. I finally managed to self-remedy my migraine by visualization. I saw my pain areas as resulted of my imaginary feathers being matted and weighed down by atmosphere, biosphere, and beingness. I imagined myself letting them to allow fresh air in and around. This brought immediate relief, and my day had a turnaround. Today is the first Tuesday in May, this year, and it's evening, now, after our bedtime medicines, and I sat down to this writing. I put one of my records on my DVD player, Curio, and I'm enjoying the light flowing of music while I'm inputting these thoughts. Most of my records are spontaneously created documents. I think that for this one, however, one or two of the organ pieces were redone, and the overall quality was improved. At any rate, I'm fairly happy with my finished part 1 of this Into the Future audiobook. So starting part 2 is something that comes along pretty easily, and ordinarily. Trusting myself, simply having enough confidence and certitude to do what I have to do each day, is important. I know that I can win approval with my melodic, lyrical piano playing style. This might be my recourse, if I can easily make things work through this writing. I'll see what good can come through some playing. But writing can be done like playing an instrument. If I can express lofty heights of emotion and write beautiful melodic chordal passages, if I can do this in writing, then I'll be a strong, capable perspective, and my writing will be wholly adequate at most any time. At any rate, it helps, I think, to understand the musical attributes in our speech. How we might not be saying anything of any more significance than, I feel great this morning, or this has all worked out. I'm glad about this. Our speech might be made solely of inflection, rhythm, and tone, and still be expressive and profound. Well, you can see. These thoughts will be the first part of my Into the Future audiobook part 2. I'll be glad to have this begin, and can get along, in writing, down the page. Anyways, I was thinking, this morning, aren't we who are living today, somewhat all survivors of the games and perils of life? At least, so far. Shouldn't we feel something like camaraderie and fraternity? Because it does look like death is no respecter of persons. It takes a certain aptitude to survive on the open road. This is true. Part of having this is, I think, knowing to watch out for the other guy. At any rate, today is the first Wednesday in May, this year. The whippoorwill is singing, and there's, I think, a cloud layer overhead. The worst of the precipitation passed over us last night, and has moved on over to the east. I'm sitting up in my apartment, an hour before I go to get my morning medicines, at the main building. After this is accomplished, I'll get a bite of breakfast, and clean up anything that needs straightening in our kitchen. If I don't have an appointment at the main office, I'll then be free somewhat until lunchtime. At any rate, this is our day. At the end of an arduous day, I'm somewhat unwinding, and enjoying my coffee. It's good when everyone gets off of the road, and gets safe and sound in their homes. At any rate, this is the goal. We're really over the middle wheat hill by now. And if you ask me, it's all downhill from here. It really depends on your particular perspective, doesn't it? At any rate, I found that when the time of dues paying arises, and my life and free time gets taken up by mental labor of an unglamorous sort, this is when I can do best, by getting my word processor and smart device out. Just tapping into the inner and outer space thinking, which somehow must rejoin with the earth inside. Then this duad, or contrasting spiritual pairing, gets busy. Just as when the rod, or staff strikes a rock, and fresh water springs forth, there arises a whole series of outputs, or musical scores, or written essays, which then suffice as a winning game. But, at any rate, I know that I can usually get my writing work to move along down my page by the usage of some jazz thought. For example, we can imagine the pure flowing of spring water, bounding forth down the hillside. From this, we can easily inference the quiet, still pond in the vale below. I found how if I can at once get inside of a narrative flowing, say for instance, put my head beneath the surface of the green pond water, with a snorkel and mask, for instance, then there would immediately leap into my consciousness a hidden world of subaquatic life, plant life, and amphibian, and fish, and so forth, as it were stepping inside of a linear, narrative flowing, where the more minute, detailed ongoing and live processes are visible, and are thriving. Until my mind can make this leap, I'm sort of like a fish out of water. Only, this is a blissful and languid kind of separation. Instead of quickly getting back beneath the water's surface, I instead enjoy the rare and blissful, woozy intoxication, which is something like a sugar rush, only somewhat unable to really truly slip inside a linear flowing, or actually feel well. The next day, and I do feel well. I believe that we'll go home one day, to truly live the life that is constantly ongoing within ourselves. But, until that moment arises, we are ensouled at the material world. Even this writing is a sort of distracted yet engaged relating. Living is a marriage of both heaven and hell. It was really challenging, yesterday afternoon, to have to subtract out whole paragraphs of what I had come up with in that writing. I concluded, at a point, that it would have been better to just leave well enough alone, and to be grateful for my finished part 1, than to go forth into part 2, making so many waves. So, I decided to trim the lot of the essay out. At any rate, I've striven to get these ideas down, this evening, and get the bandwidth down to something more manageable. So, no new magma vents in our neighborhood. At least not here. I think that the imagery of striking the rock, and of having spring water come forth, is an Old Testament notion that conjures images of nuclear science. But such, I think, also somewhat stands for the intrinsic pairing of masculine and feminine potentialities within one mind, from which seemingly endless creativity comes forth. My belief is that this enigmatic bond is at the heart of the most Promethean literary output. There will have been the figures, across history, who have been in possession of this duad, or duality, and who will have generated enormous legacies, and who will have somewhat elevated their respective cultures. And this writing itself might be such a conjuring. The time is the next morning, now, and I've gotten my hygiene accomplished, and am just finishing out this writing. By resolving my loose ends, and any logic errors that would confuse the reader, such as that, and putting my flourishes on the end of this article. I think we are supposed to have partly cloudy weather today, but that usually means partly sunny, because the glass will usually be half full, not half empty. At any rate, this writing will initiate my new part 2. I'll wrap up this first article in this second set, and add it in with the others. Now, I hope you'll enjoy it. Have a great weekend. All for now, Greg. I'm going to try and get a few words down into this word processor. I've got about 30 minutes until I want to get over to our office to get my medicine and say good night. I'll pick up writing when I get back. In the previous article, I was writing about the need to step into the flowing stream in order to arrive upon the most circumspect perspective. In starting a book or a chapter in a book, this stream entry is of the essence. You know much more than you may realize you know at any given time. So, just in starting the flowing, one gains access to the wellspring of subconscious intellect, and can easily bring such online into a written article. Water, I think, symbolizes the subconscious matrix, and lattice work of presences invisibly about a person, in the same way that a snorkel and mask allow you to easily see that which is hidden beneath. I think that our etheric eyesight, when we have awakened such, allows us to gain incremental consciousness of unseen ongoings about ourselves. I think also that perhaps our afterlife eyesight will be much more revealing of subconscious and unconscious presences. We'll then be on equal footing with the others within, and so they'll be much more clearly visible. If you don't believe that we have consciousness after our physical death, then maybe you see how death might be a calm awakening in a baby's crib, and the not knowing quite sure how he or she got there. I think you'll always have these two possible answers to the afterlife question. Basically, it might be as simple as this. At any rate, it's no wonder, really, that we pondered over existential questions such as these, as life shows us so much, and there are simply too many unanswered questions, until looking within tends to bring to mind, I think, these two answers. I'm going to get these meds, and get back to my apartment. In looking at the printed news, we're somewhat given perspective. but sitting with a notebook and pen, we can glean insight into our own unique tomorrow. This is something which poets and mystics know, which pretty much frees ourselves from excessive reliance on typical information outlets. Good days and bad days, for someone like myself, are measured by, for instance, how sure my grip is upon my existential now, and how strong tomorrow's picture is, or appears to be. Of course, I want to know if threatening weather is headed my way, but most of my values are wrapped up in my prospects for new artistic and literary wins and gains. Writing the law might give to you a large stack of finished pieces, but you too can see the worth of having some way to publish your own work. You might find that your publishing is just as important as your creating of digital equity. The two are intertwined. Finding one's place in the world. Feeling like you're respected for what your spirit can accomplish artistically, or in a literary sense. This will somewhat involve having a book or artistic relationship, patrons, or else having an internet connection, and a producer's desktop personal computer, or laptop computer. At any rate, I'm glad to share this sort of thinking, because someone may want to read it when I get it online. Many things about computers will come to a person intuitively. These include how to operate an internet browser, and how to work with your computer's folder system to keep new work organized. But other things may require a leap of faith, so to speak, such as what someone filling you in on a particular facet or distinction would bring. And the internet has many instructional computer tutorials. I think the person will want to learn of the differences between smartphones and tablets and personal computers, in order to know what phones and tablets will do, and what you will need a desktop or laptop computer for. So, distinctions such as these are just part of learning the art of self-publishing. Anyways, if I were to tell you of my present existential well-being, such an account would have to include mention of this type of migraine. This sort of crucible of creating which has risen in my mind over the last hour or so. I'm very accustomed to the way that I have to, for instance, pass through a narrow gauntlet of sorts until I get the precise wording worked out in an important piece. My experience closes into a narrow point before opening back out into openness and freedom. The person has to come to understand how open space is unified, and one can easily sense another's emotions if he tries. The air within a dwelling, or place of business, or professional environment is an interconnected fabric. And the sooner we come to understand this, I think, the better we can establish our boundaries. But in some ways, all minds share the same spaces here on the surface of this earth. Stepping out of sight, or out of mind, isn't too hard a thing to fathom and do. But once you understand the religious fervency of others, you'll see how we can know some little thing about virtually all things under heaven, without ever leaving our door. But, I digress. I'm sitting here upon this bed, at about an hour before I have to get over to the office for my medicines. I've been enjoying the pleasant flowing of ambient and instrumental music coming from my smartphone speaker for a while, and I can just see the way into this writing this morning. Our skies are somewhat gray, it's chilly, and we're expecting generally rainy weather through to about midday today. Definitely this is a good day to be indoors. I know that I'll feel better this afternoon, for instance, when the sun is out. At any rate, these are a few of my thoughts this morning. I've been sitting here with my hands resting on this keyboard for the last 2 hours, but I've been drifting in and out of sleep, not getting any writing done. But this panic I've been listening to. Wow. Every once in a while you make a particularly big discovery of a musician, which redefines all of your standards, so to speak, and this is one of them. I'll be listening to this for a while. It's so good. Anyways, today is the second Saturday in May this year. I sit writing after our lunchtime and listening to this piano player. I believe that I've learned something from this stream of consciousness playing style. Just what would our playing be like if rather than interspersing occasional dreamy segments, we made the dream sequences the main focus? Well, the time is around to 1 p.m. I sit writing, and the sun is just beginning to come through the clouds here, seen through the open blinds in my bedroom window. I sit with this Bluetooth keyboard on my lap, and looking at the screen on my smart device. I'm carefully examining each thought expression that arises into my consciousness, and including only the best into this writing. In order for it to be as durable as I can make it, I take it slow, and only gradually arrive upon a completed essay. This will eventually build a quality product. I've been writing along into this essay for the past 2 days now, and I'm reasonably sure that it's the best that it can be. Getting every idea down onto paper involves resting with my hands on my keyboard. I'm gradually going to finish this writing process into its conclusion. Well, I'm glad to have these ideas on paper now, and I'm relieved and contented that the best has been done. Well, these ideas are beginning to come to their conclusion now, so I'll allow them to finish out onto my page. I hope that you all have a pleasant rest of the weekend. All for now. I'll wrap this writing up and add it in with the others. Greg, I awoke early enough this morning to try and get some writing done. So I've got my Bluetooth keyboard on my lap, and my smart device's word processor open off to my side. So, with something like a sense of purpose really leading me through this, I begin. You know, my sobriety is probably the most important thing in my life. I don't say this lightly. This simple living I've been given is really so much fun. And when I can allow myself a cup of coffee now and then, just this is enough. At any rate, I'm really thinking that I'm going to look at this fountain of youth concept for a while this morning. It seems like, in my life, once I got through my hermeticism period of me trying to live on my own in the world, it all came down to the inner duality, and what such a wonder can do for a life like mine. I think that through time, certain ones will have come into this two or more together concept. It's certainly one thing to know that people need people, but being kept in touch with an inner pairing of gender contrast, this opens the doorway into a truly unlimited wellspring of creative genius, somewhat like the promise of unlimited clean energy. This special provision of the spirit realm has really paved the way for myself into a self-regenerating renewal of my career that has spanned more than 25 years of my recent life. I can only think that this is, those who like the reading might agree. That's not to say that such a potentiality, such a latency, doesn't occasionally come around unexpectedly or encounter associated pain, because it sometimes does. But when things work properly, such can be nice. I do believe that with a tacit nod to the numberless ocean of God, as such as this would only be, the door is then opened into concepts and metaphors of even the nuclear medicine category. Many other blessings can be found as well. If our solar system is seen as a good model or template in the universal sense, then you see how keeping within sensible limits of innocence and honesty and integrity will always be the best plan. Anyways, I guess that I'll have to see if the sense of fussiness and breathless tumult that this essay is composed within will stand up next to thorough self-examination. It should, and it will, I think. I just sometimes let various precocious mental states kind of set me at an angle to a time period. You could have sensed how my mind was working overtime as I started into this article, only later balancing and smoothing it out into the stability you might see or feel here. At any rate, once you've found a real peaceful time in your life, you'll definitely endeavor to conform to its precepts. Such can be anyone's rule. Whatever the matter is, give it to God. This almost always goes without saying. Sometimes, I should really put my hands and arms up past the sides of my face and head. Alternatively, just allowing air to circulate around, in general. If you can't remember to allow this breathing around whatever part is affected, as well as your sun salute, you'll feel compressed and claustrophobic beneath the heavy, sort, weighted down air trapped around. Give it to God, and let the fresh air circulate. At any rate, you may be one of the ones who have to imagine how a real cool air stream feels brushing against your face. If a fan is in the room with you, it will feel cooler, like a cool wind stream. This is true. Well, that's really all I've been thinking about lately. Anyways, today is a partly sunny, blustery and balmy day. Perfect for the middle of spring. There's a flood watch in effect, and hopefully this will be a good rain that nourishes the farmers' crops. But a flood watch probably suggests that the ground is already saturated, so any rain wouldn't help. I sit still gradually progressing this article along, and my main goal in writing it is for such to be more than 10 pages in length. The work is laborious and slow, but it tends to focus my attention and take my mind off of any troubles. I think that the mental exercises at this time in my life are kind of trying to teach me to use the kind of triaxial analysis when looking at these types of migraines. One of the three methods will usually work. See, also, how any mental focus exercise always should come with an A part and a B part. The A is what it starts like, and the B part is a secondary visualization. What the first way is backed up with, and followed by. This one smart device will work with numerous Bluetooth accessories at the same time. I can input text with my keyboard, and I can listen to earbuds simultaneously. I may have to imagine keeping my hands and arms upstretched past the sides of my head. When this doesn't work, I can try imagining fluffing my feathers and letting cool air circulate in the space beneath them. While seeing the top of the coin, know also that the reverse side is beneath. You have to grow to always see this dual and changing nature in everything. Well, if I keep on writing and thinking in such a succinct and concise manner, I'll not be troubled by migraines much anymore. And my way will somewhat reset, like the resetting of the Gregorian calendar each year. At any rate, I hope that this present time of the year is pleasant for you, and that you'll practice healthy acceptance and trust. I've learned to trust in God, not man, unless he's guided every step by God. I think it's very nice that I see how each cognitive aspect will be in process of changing into a secondary aspect, and back again. The best thing about the sun salute visualization is how I get to let the refreshing breezes get under my matted heart hairdo before I go back into the sun salute visualization. I think that it's as simple as this. At the same time, this triaxial way isn't always a cinch. I may have to find another way. Any winning game has a way of bottoming out in some cases, and we therefore must keep searching for enterprise solutions. That is, if one wants to stay in a particular game. I myself live with some major depression symptoms, so you should see that I'm pretty much precluded from ever attending independent living again. I'll have to stay with a group home relationship, or risk winding up drinking and popping pills just to deal with any given day. And that way would lead to certain suicide. At any rate, I can't help it, this article is winding down now, so I'll wrap it up and add it in with the others. All for now, Greg. I'm sitting outside in this cool breezy May evening. Light gray clouds are going by briskly, but not too briskly overhead, faintly tinted pink by some local city lights against the dark night sky. This is the second Sunday in May this year, and I'm glad to be present and accounted for. I'm getting inside this office and getting in line with the others for my medicine. I'm looking forward to getting these meds and getting back to my apartment. I'm sitting here, after our meeting, with my hands upon this keyboard, getting down appropriate thoughts. Having the tools, instruments, and software is one thing, this is true, but being in an artistic, literary partnering with higher ascended presences, and knowing how to act as such, this makes each day somewhat fun, and the past 5 years especially have seen me writing quite prolifically, and I've gotten down numerous books and pamphlets. I think that in the time like today, I can't figure myself in with the myriad writers and artists who have come before this, and I'm my own unique voice as well. I don't think that I would ever want to say that I alone am the artist any more than any other artist or writer would. When an accident or unintended event happens, I would not wish to blame myself for such any more than anyone else would ever wish such a thing. There wouldn't have been anything I could have done one way or another to anticipate or control the outcome in any way. Such was in another part of the world, anyway, so I certainly couldn't help. I do sometimes have to absorb losses, because they happen sometimes, and move along as well as I am able. I can't give you my condolences. That's all. So, this is why I'm writing in this way. Well, I'll move right along now, because I didn't intend to dwell in this area of thinking any more than I had to do to deal with it. I'm very grateful that I got over to the supermarket Wednesday to get some important household items. and I just about couldn't be better in the here and now, so I certainly haven't anything to complain about. This apartment has outstanding air conditioning and heat, no water leaks, no infestations. 2 meals a day are provided, per my request, and the location is just fine. In a wooded neighborhood, very much like many others near here. Additionally, this place is 5 minutes away from a shopping district, so the location is very convenient. Anyways, it's the next day and I'm sitting in our kitchen enjoying the intermittent, bright morning sun streaming in through our sliding glass doors, and watching the birds coming and going from our feeder. I've seen hermit thrushes, cardinals, purple martins, and turkeys, to name a few. Today is the second Monday in May this year. Today our weather is intermittent sunshine, with a flood watch in effect. We're not predicted to have a fully sunny day until Wednesday. At any rate, I'm enjoying this piano player's performances, and getting written down whatever ideas will come. I think that it's very easy to say, well, I'm older in years, so I'll be better at improvisation than you, but this way has to take into account the present work the person is doing. I mean, some people will be fixed upon doing studio work, and releasing perfect albums. But some, perhaps more advanced souls, might be recording stream of consciousness musings, which don't use limiting or restricting titles, or labels, at all. This has been myself. Since about 2012 I've been recording just piano improvisational entries, and foregoing titles. This way has allowed me to be much more prolific than I would have otherwise. But my playing is usually light and sketchy. This pianist is so very well versed at his journalistic piano playing. He just puts a date on his individual pieces. And his style of playing ranges from exquisitely beautiful to merely amazing. So, acquiring these contemporary piano recordings has definitely been one of my recent high points. At any rate, this is the 4th article in this part 2 of this Into the Future audiobook. My writing lately is somewhat slow to a crawl, so I suppose I perhaps should put this composition process on the back burner for a while. Or at least until ideas emerge, which can give it more depth. At any rate, I can't sit and incrementally progress my thinking, and eventually fill out the space of an article, but this is tedious. Much of this journal, across the past, has been composed in this way. Just a word here, a sentence there. Never writing much at any given time. But I always think of my best writing in this as being like me frantically striving to get enormous thoughts down on paper before they get away. Anyways, some writing sessions will be like this. Others will be more like an incremental process, to be sure. At any rate, writing requires attentiveness, which is to say, you've got to focus on it, to make it work. If you're trying to read the television as well, your focus will suffer. So be prepared to give it the necessary attention. At any rate, I'm often reminded of kernels of wisdom that have come through my typist hands in past works. Especially, I often offer quotes from my earliest writings. The Stream of Consciousness book began in 2000. One of my favorites is about how older people get pains, deep aches, which can only be eased by the forgiveness and intervention of youth. Maybe you'd call your mother if you knew she'd like to hear from you. I know that I'm quite happy being around my younger housemate. You'd think that I would like listening to older people's music, but most of my collection which I'm most interested in are musics done by younger people. So my music doesn't always have to be from older and wiser wizards. I see so much from within younger visions. At any rate, just some thoughts. I'm glad to get these ideas on paper now, and will add them in with the others. Here's an idea. I've seen how you're not the only one who feels insecure. On the aside, we all seem to balance precariously on the edge of an abyss. So, don't let your uncertainty consume your consciousness. Make sure you make your intentions clear. Don't project your fears and self-doubts onto those about you. Remember the power of prayer. Your spirit's your advocate, and wants to bridge and forgive the perceived deficit. Sometimes, my words of advice for others are only meant for myself. Our outside weather has gotten dark, and we might get a thunder shower. Perfect spring weather, I guess. At any rate, these ideas appear to be winding down now, so I'll wrap them up and add them in with the others. All for now, Greg. Today is the second Wednesday in May this year. and I sit enjoying the lively conversation while I await my getting morning mess and on my way. Today is expected to be our first full sunny day in a week or more, so we're looking forward to the warmth and gladness which such can bring. Even though this is true, I think that the forecaster is talking about bad weather brewing in the Middle West and South. Our sunlight is nice while it lasts though. If I don't have to go on the van today, I'll be free to get things done which I want to do earlier. At any rate, I've got tools, instruments, and media for getting things done. We here were thinking, somewhat, about the condition the world's in these days. I thought extensively about how, when a person, or a song, or a corporation, or a nation, or even an animal, or organism is dealt a handicap, or is administered a controlled amount of a particular venom, for instance, in a clinical setting, where meticulous records are kept, and conditions are somewhat controlled, the organism's resistance to the venom is enhanced by a controlled administration of the same venom. Any kind of handicap, for instance, will make an animal or person adopt adaptive strategies. So many of the world's greatest pianists, for instance, are blind. A person like Stephen Hawking, so bent and crippled, still is seen as an emblem of triumph and scientific enlightenment, and was given high honors. So a crippling or disfiguring disability can suffice to make us stronger. The Jewish people, the main subjects of the Holy Bible, whose concerns God held so closely, were dealt Nazism, and although many perished, they returned in force throughout the 20th century, despite the genocide, and I think were made stronger for it. It's just true, when you limit or handicap an organism, or person, or animal, they are indirectly made so much stronger. Just look at my life, for example. Despite having been dealt a time with schizophrenia at a young age, 23, and having 2 serious suicide attempts around the end of my 20s, I've been so very prolific. My setbacks became my life testimony, and I've written an enormous set of writings in a relatively short time. I'm past my prime, perhaps, but still determined not to let the blows of my late 20s hold me back, or ruin my life. I've kept up such an outstanding work ethic. Here's another example. Military service, for instance. When a young man is toughened and regimented in this way, they often become high achievers. And many of the world's leaders came from military backgrounds. Another thing, which can supercharge a life, is prison time. Many ex-convicts developed strong life testimony, and simply recognizing the enormous value contained in any given day, in a free nation, have become prolific authors, or musicians. Prison time changes a person, not always for the better, but some people turn it around, and make it into stronger faith and testimony than anything they had previously. If a person is dealt lemons in life, they'll make a lot of lemonade. I know that I have done so in my years. I know that I was given a somewhat disfiguring handicap, and then placed in a clinical environment, and I think it was partly that which made me stronger for it. At any rate, you get the idea. One's life and times might have practically been a psychotic episode, for a while, in his or her 20s, but once he figures out how to live with the handicap, he will be much stronger from then on. Anyways, these are just some ideas. We're made better by adversity. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. At any rate, I'm getting these ideas down for inclusion in the 5th article in this second part of this Into the Future audiobook. Sitting here this afternoon, I've pondered over just what is on my deep mind right now. Often, I'll feel like I just want to vegetate and listen to my music jukebox. Of course, I want to be productive and get some things done as well. I've got this writing coming along, true, but I've also got some ideas for ballpoint sketchings. Thirdly, I feel like I could get some piano playing recorded, and that would be good as well. But I might just sit and vegetate. I finally figured it out. I've simply acquired some incredibly important music recently, and I want to listen and grasp just how my jukebox works now, with these added artistic genius work included. This last thing is important, I think, because these are shows and recordings that I've been waiting for a long time to finally acquire and get my copies of in my world music archives. I know also that I have a mental illness, and that my sobriety is of a large importance to myself. Still, finding the others and locating important artistic genius is very important to me. Such makes my world go around, just like gravity and inertia. Musical and artistic visions are also important forces in my life, and I can accept and acknowledge this. I can enjoy them, too, since most of my symptoms are in check right now, and I've been doing very well. I'm in the black, so to speak, as well, because I've finished 2 full-length audiobooks already this year. So, knowing that these are going out to curious and interested readers means a lot. More than 100 copies of the Enemies of Wisdom of the Ancients audiobook have gone forth into the world already. I'd say that's pretty good for a project that large. So, I'm feeling real contentment and happiness because my goals are so well met. So, these reasons are why I think I can just vegetate and let this jukebox spin for a while. And these thoughts, presently, are of course going into my latest books part 2. Having this article and getting such integrated with the others, I think we'll finish the audiobook chapter 2. So, I can understand and have compassion for myself if I try. If you think about it, the small dose of linguistic pessimism is part of what makes the world go round. But if you think some more, you might see it's not really that bad, in actuality, because it's just talk. People always talk. But there are reasons for the pleasant, mellow moods today, and I can easily forgive them. Just remember how, to quote someone else, there might not be bigger things than yourself that control the path you take. Can we not trust our instincts, for instance, when it comes to having what it takes already to get from point A to point B, into the foreseeable future? Can't I just rest and enjoy my coming weekend? Down the hill, somewhat, into a new climb. There's something very healthy and natural about pessimism. Well, these have just been some thoughts. I'm glad to have gotten them down in this journal, and will be grateful to send along this new audiobook chapter. All for now, Greg. I've got a few minutes before a store trip this morning, and I thought I'd write a few words in conclusion of my latest part 2 of this audiobook. I hope that you can see the basic philosophy which guides me. I write, but such is intended to be for the sake of entertainment, and, mainly, I try and stay out of trouble areas. There's nothing so bad as having to go behind yourself because you've gotten too far to the right or left, and I learned long ago that this type of ambient piano is so high up in the scheme of things you can do on any given morning that I have to make sure I mind my manners peevishly. I can easily imagine myself getting criticized for most any personal opinion. Although no one's ever criticized me openly, I'm neurotic and I like the sunny side of the street so much, I don't want to ever lose sight of it. So, you see how I feel about getting politically critical or opinionated. I stay on the sidewalk to the exclusion of getting opinionated. At any rate, I live with others who have taken setbacks so much that they have to have assistance. It just goes to show you societal differences. There's saying just what you feel, and then there's being careful about what you say. The latter's I guess the downside of the coin, and that's where I stay, for the most part. I guess that if my feelings or opinions were so strong that I was given to speaking of them in my art, it would be in the other direction. About how I watch what I say and do. I guess that this is the perspective of the archetypal wounded hero, who has been hurt and purified by the fires of Hades, and who has emerged triumphant, but shaken. I'll always be in a place like this, having been through the agitated condition for 6 years, and felt the extreme loneliness of feeling like one's soul has been revoked. Very few people would understand this kind of perspective, outside of the mental health care system. I'm too wounded to exercise my full rights and liberties, such as the freedom of speech. But freedom comes up in other ways, especially in light of my tendency to use provocative or suggestive imagery in my visual art, or my sketching. It's very nice to know that I can't be imprisoned for my graphic art, and feel like this is the right place for me, for that reason. The critics of the government say that we are entering an authoritarian period, and that's just not good, because unless you hold the same views as those in charge, you can be harassed, investigated, and interrogated, and held up in numberless ways. And that this is already happening. I do indeed have a mind that appreciates the theoretical purity of our democratic ideals, and strives for them, but I had had the hard times of addiction and mental illness. It's kind of tricky when your own mind appears to be your own worst enemy. This is the mental illness perspective. Someone said, "How? The only game you can't beat is the game within your own self." It's easy to see the right values for me today, on the healthy side of life. But back when I was 19 or 20, my substance use issues were too deeply set, and I thought that, I'm in pain, aren't I? Shouldn't I take something for it? Only this meant cough syrup, and ephedrine stimulant pills, and alcohol and narcotics when I could get them. My mind had to be saved from the materialist paradigm, and spiritualized into a life based in truth and honesty. I was just a thing in pain, for about 10 years, and I would take anything, and would then wonder why I hurt worse. But the good Lord worked His way, and the darkness and dirty muddy water gradually returned to translucence and clarity. I'll always stay on the sidewalk, so to speak, so I don't find myself in a world of hurt and pain. These days the sidewalk isn't even safe. At any rate, if these are the thoughts running through the corridors of my mind, I should write them down. I've learned not to take the thoughts of the good angels who accompany ourselves through life for granted. They're meant for you alone to receive and keep. But when I see a page of illumined writings, and when I'm moved profoundly by the mere reading of them, I think of how God could use me to reach the minds of people who crave truth, and who seek after words of truth. I think that it's the most amazing thing, to live in a country where the nation's Bill of Rights is so revered as it is in our country. If a thing is contrary to our Bill of Rights, or tends to ignore, or forgo such, it will be highly unpopular, as a rule. This is the strength of our time, in the West, and it appears to be healthy and well. Anyways, these have been just a few thoughts. Well, having had a productive weekend already, and gotten a new short art video put together, and onto the internet, I should be able to just sit back, and get some rest. So, I'll think about wrapping this writing up, and adding it in with the others, to finish part 2. Now, all for now, have a good new week. Greg